So, we always talk about training heavy, training hard, pushing our bodies to the limits. But in reality, it's when you back off is when you grow. This is one of the biggest factors that I learned from breaking my first world record to being on top for nearly 15 years. The trick was deloading. The first thing we have to ask ourselves is, what is deloading? Deloading can come from anywhere from making a workout shorter. We can deload in time. We can deload in intensity and max effort. We can deload in intensity of speed work. And we can also deload in intensity of the repetition method or accessories or winning warm-ups. The point is deloading usually means just taking something down so that the body can recover. In the 25 years plus that I have been training my ass off, I have learned that we got to take 3 steps forward and 1 step back. 3 weeks you can progress, and 1 week you got to back down. Now that doesn't mean that you may feel like you need to back down. Sometimes when I've hit my 3rd week of slowly ramping up everything, I felt my best. And that's when I have found, when I feel my absolute best is when I need to take a step back and let my body recover, because I'm right on the line of overtraining. I did not learn that I had to take 3 steps forward and 1 step back until nearly almost my first world record, where my body just kept progressing. Then all of a sudden, progressing was halting. And what I found was when I started to learn how to back off is when my progress went crazy. So in an equipped level squat, I started to notice that I had to learn this. I was squatting 1,085 pounds. And within 1 year to about a year and a half, my squat went to 1,200. And the only thing that I changed was the fact that every 4th week I would take something down and let my body recover. When this gets really, really important is when you don't have a lot of variation in your training. So you have to follow this to a T, especially if you train very specific, like i.e. straight bar squats, straight bar bench, straight bar deadlifts all the time. Not having to follow this 3-to-1 ratio if your variation is so vast that the body doesn't really need deloads. But I found that the older I got, I still needed this in my programming. If you follow this, you're going to notice that you're probably not going to get sick as much, your appetite's going to stay high, your anabolic hormones are going to stay better, and you're not going to overtrain nearly as hard. This was the biggest trick I had to learn from going from 1,080 squat to 1,100. Well, the trick is we have to cut out what we're good at. And that sounds crazy, but that means if you can strain, cut out max. If you're explosive and really athletic, cut out dynamics. If you're in really good shape, cut out your accessories and your warm-ups. If we don't listen to this rule, well, the first one that I've noticed over many, many years is that I lose my appetite. Step 2 is my sleep quality starts to go bad. I lay down at my normal time, about 8:30. About 9 o'clock, I want to fall asleep, and I can't fall asleep. It's like my brain won't shut off. I'm tired, but my body won't come down. And then finally, if I don't listen to those 2, sickness ensues. What that means is that I'll start to get sinus infections, I'll start to get sick, I'll start to have fluish feelings, I'll start to get immensely sore. So the thing of it is that you have massive consequences to not listen to 3-to-1. So just remember, take 3 steps forward, take 1 step back, and you'll find that the amount of steps that you take in a 5, 10, or 15-year process are going to be so much higher than if you just keep giving everything you have every week. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way. Now, deloading is something that is not talked about often because the market is selling intensity. But deloading is just as important. If you're going to train hard, the word that we need to all be familiar with if we're trying to train at any level is supercompensation. And this means it takes time to see the results from your training, really in a nutshell. And what that means is that when you train, you beat your body down. If you give your body ample time to recover, it builds itself up. So let's look at a chart of what a traditional supercompensation chart would look like. Let's say that this is your base strength, endurance. It doesn't matter what it is. Let's just say this is your physical base. When you go through a particular training regimen, and it can be dependent upon how long, but let's just say 6 weeks. We go through a month and a half of training. What ends up happening is this. We get weaker and then we get a little better. This is supercompensation in a nutshell. So we had to dig ourselves a little bit of a hole in an optimal range. We give ourselves a little bit of a deload, and then our body gets better. And then over time, as we do this, if we're smart, then what happens is we go through another training block and it does this. So that's what it looks like over, let's say, a 15-year period. Now, why I say a 15-year period is because for most of you, we don't have Bo Jackson genetics. I didn't win my first world championship until I was 19 years old, and I'd already been training for 7 years with no breaks. I started when I was 12. So this is what you could say was I was at when I was 12 years old. And then this is where I'm at now, around 40, okay? This is a lifelong process. The deload, it doesn't mean that you don't train. What it means is that you take something away from your training that allows you to recover and rehabilitate yourself and build back. But there's another reason why the deloading is so important that nobody talks about. The big thing that the deload is important for is ligaments and tendons grow at a slower rate than muscle tissue responds to training. This means that if you train too hard too fast, the muscles respond and the joints get mad. And when that happens, over time you create a ton of mileage. By dropping training down every 3 to 4 weeks to allow the body to recover, what ends up happening is that we are able to actually see the progress of training and also reduce or eliminate mileage. Start realizing they don't ever deload. They go hard, they get injured, and then they back off for 6 months, and then they go hard, and then they get injured and they back off for 6 months. If they would have built in the deloading in those processes, they never got injured, and they kept climbing as that chart that I... Well, the most biggest thing I think that most people can do is lower intensity. What we call an unload. An unload is where we actually take the training completely away, which I am never a huge fan of because the body adapts to training, but it also adapts to nothing very, very quickly. If you were to take someone and put them in a bed and keep them motionless for up to 2 weeks, they're going to lose upwards of about 30 to 40% if you're lucky of their strength. They would lose almost 50% of their strength in 14 days. That's impressive in the wrong way. Supercompensation and deloading is maintaining optimal volume for restoration, so you're still moving and you're still getting some stimulation, but it's not at the level to create any more damage. It actually causes a restoration effect, is the intensity. So step one, in my opinion, deloading is all about reducing intensity, but not necessarily volume. So as you'll see in these workouts that we're posting behind while I'm talking, we're still doing an immense amount of work. So for the warm-up, instead of doing 4 sets of 25, which we flipped the actual exercise amount to sets of 50. Now that's going to reduce the amount tremendously. So as you can see in this video, I'm using a 30 to 40 pound dumbbell versus a 60 to 80 pound dumbbell for warm-up. That drastically reduced the intensity, but the volume is still 100 reps. Same thing holds true with the lat pull down and the tricep push down that you're seeing right now. Those two particular exercises are almost cut in half on the amount of weight is actually on the stack, but the reps have doubled in that set. So it's making the burn pretty extreme, but it's also reducing the RPE or intensity by dropping the amount of weight that we can use. So that's one way we do it. So I think the biggest step that you could think about in deloading is understanding that it's not necessarily not working out. It's changing the stimulus to the point that it's really not the same thing, allowing some healing. Now, what I also like about upwards of over 25 reps on most sets or slowing everything down is the fact that it's going to let the ligaments, tendons, and soft tissue actually heal. So deloading is absolutely needed because for most of us, we are going to overreach when we train. That means that we only have so much energy that we can positively adapt to in a day, week, month, or even possibly a year. By building in deloads, we are forcing the body to actually heal and then again make positive progress. This gets really difficult for people that like to work out really hard because of the fact that we think if we're not giving 100% every day, that we're not getting any better. Well, that's absolutely not true. I would say, today what you're seeing in this workout video, we got this entire workout done in 35 minutes. Now, most of the time, we get a workout done in around 60 minutes. So we've not only cut the amount of intensity down dramatically, but we've also reduced time. So that's another key point. In deloading, don't think of it as not working out. Think of it as cutting back the amount of time in which it takes for that stimulus that day. So if I cut the stimulus in half, then the body is going to recuperate much, much better. Now, where do we put deloads? Well, usually we put deloads after we've tried an overreaching segment. So last week, we did a really heavy squat with a double blue band. Now, this band is about 200 pounds of tension at the top and 100 pounds of tension at the bottom. So for me, I did a 700 and an 800 pound squat, which was pretty difficult. And then we did a double loop 405 bench, which is 200 pounds of band tension plus 405. Now, these numbers for myself right now at my age and body weight are very, very extreme. So for this week, which started on Monday, Tuesday, which was yesterday, what we started to do was deload everything and let everything recuperate since we overreached slightly last week. So if you're going through a bout of really pushing the limits, make sure that every 3, 4, or 5 weeks you're putting in a scheduled deload. You can either deload or your body will force the deload. What does that mean? Well, usually if you get injured, you're going to have to deload because you can't do the same amount of work, right? That injury usually occurred weeks before it actually happened. You just weren't listening to your body. You constantly kept trying to overreach. The reason that most people don't want to do it is because the entire fitness industry sells intensity instead of smarts. So do some more. It's not what you can do, it's what you can recover from. And this is why it's so difficult. We try to get people to come on to online coaching